Welcome to the Crush Your Sugar Cravings Summit. I'm Michelle Jolly with Healthy Horizons Coaching. Today we'll be speaking with Dr. Joan Ifland. She has been creating breakthroughs in recovery from food addiction for many years, starting with her first popular book in 1999 to her 2018 textbook, Processed Food Addiction: Foundations, Assessment, and Recovery. Dr. Ifland is a fellow of the American College of Nutrition. She earned her PhD in addictive nutrition at Union Institute and University in 2010, her MBA at Stanford Business School in 1978, and her BA in economics and political science at Oberlin College in 1974. She was selected by the Oprah Winfrey Network as a food addiction specialist on the Book of John Gray. She has innovated in online services as the Addiction Reset community. She has founded the sites which provide free services, including the Facebook group Food Addiction Education, and handouts at foodaddictionresources.com. Reset Week is the first online live video program for withdrawal from processed foods. Dr. Ifland's meal plan manual is a breakthrough system to easily manage meals, which resolves a major barrier to recovery from food addiction. She is a lead author of the first scholarly publication describing refined food addiction and definition of addictive foods. Dr. Ifland currently resides in Seattle, Washington. Thanks for joining us today. So good to have you.
Michelle, thanks for having me. I just appreciate this opportunity to share.
Yeah. So people can we heard a little bit about your background, but maybe you want to give us a little more in-depth story of how you got to this place, how you got into sugar addictions?
Yeah. So I was raised in what I would just kind of gently call a chaotic household. People were erupting in temper all the time. Nobody had a weight problem growing up until high school. So nobody really connected this chaotic behavior with processed foods. But we had a lot of processed foods in our house. We had sugary breakfast cereal and juice from concentrate, and then white bread and margarine and sugar, and we're baking sweets all the time. Every day there was a sweet baked in our house, and we were fighting all the time. We were angry people all the time. Well, fast forward to now I'm 44 years old, and I have these two gorgeous children and a wonderful husband, and I'm raging and I can't stop. My girls are 11 and 12 years old. I've done therapy, I've done 12-step groups, I've done women's groups, and the raging is continuing. And that's what I grew up with. And I was so determined that my children would not grow up with that. Well, nothing worked. And then somebody in the 12-step group heard sugar driving my rage. Mm-hmm. They suggested that I go into recovery from processed foods, or from food. We called it a food addiction. Mm-hmm. And I did, and the raging stopped. 3 weeks into giving up just sugars and flours, which is what we knew about then, I realized I hadn't raged in 3 weeks. It was that fast.
Wow.
But I also noticed that I was losing 2 pounds a week. I was never hungry. The cravings stopped. The brain fog cleared up, fatigue stopped, the allergies stopped. I had a sinus infection my whole life, that stopped. Yeah. The bloating stopped, the uneven moods, the wanting to fall asleep twice a day, all of that stopped. And it stopped rather quickly, but it was the raging. It was the release from raging and criticism and anxiety that really got me going. I started out with a handout, then I wrote a popular book, and then I tried getting on TV. TV said, look, you need expertise in your field. Your wonderful MBA doesn't help you in a nutrition field. It's not a nutrition field, it's an addiction field.
Yeah.
So I went back, I got my PhD, and then I wrote papers. I had a prepared meal company, and then I got the contract to write the textbook, which really changed everything. This is a 240,000 word book. It's got 2,000 studies in it, and it changed my life. Writing it changed my life because I could see that this is a really, really severe addiction, and it is provoked from signals outside the brain, cues, triggers, stimulation, and it's not what anybody thinks. It's not childhood issues per se, and it's not because you're too lazy or you're self-sabotaging or you're not trying hard enough. It's a mechanical reaction to, well, it all started when the tobacco industry came and took over processed foods in the mid 1980s, and they brought their addiction business model. It's a very specific business model, and they applied it to processed foods, and boom, the obesity epidemic began. So we have a mechanical problem that is being provoked by these food addiction scientists at the food industry for profit. And it's not a model that anybody else is using aside from us, but we now have online communities based on this model that you need to be able to block out that queuing. And it's working incredibly well for people who've never had control over their food in their entire lives. They now have control over their food. So of course we're really excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. So what about people that maybe they didn't have the issues that you were having when you were younger? They don't have the chronic illness or joint pain or anger. They think, oh, a little sugar is fine here and there. I'll worry about it later if things get worse. What do you say to them?
Well, I say that when you look at processed foods, and sugar is just the tip of the iceberg. You have flour, you have gluten, you have processed fats, you have dairy, which contains 4 different kinds of casomorphine. You have caffeine, and then you have food additives. So people all the time are disappointed they get off sugar and they're still overeating. They don't gain control of their food. It's because the addiction just said, okay, well, we don't care about sugar. We'll just go over and run the addiction on these other substances. Yeah. So we do have to be careful not to represent that just getting off of sugar is going to do the job.
Yeah.
So what I like to think about is that these processed foods are associated with about 125 diseases. We now have diet-related diseases have now surpassed smoking as the leading cause of preventable death. And in the United States alone, 1,800 people die from diet-related diseases every day. So we have this massive epidemic going on right under our noses of very, very destructive substances, very harmful, very damaging substances across the board, mental, emotional, physical, and certainly behavioral. So we have really good evidence that processed foods are much worse than cigarettes in a lot of ways. So if somebody says, well, you know, I can smoke a cigarette every now and then. Yeah. We know it hurts. We know that's a bad idea. Yeah. We know that it could be setting the person up for addiction. They could be progressing towards losing control. But even one cigarette is so harmful. We've got all the evidence that even smoking one cigarette could be considered an act of self-destruction and pathological. So when somebody says, I can eat processed foods, I'm like, no, you can't.
Yeah, why would you want to?
Well, and the other thing is there's something called unconscious impairment, where if you eat processed foods every day and you've been doing it since you were born, which everybody has, you know, processed foods are just so ingrained in westernized cultures and increasingly every culture that you don't know that you have a little bit of depression, a little bit of fatigue, a
Yeah.
little bit of pain. It's subconscious, it's unconscious. And so I say to everybody, we've got a list. We have a free public website. It's called Food Addiction Resources. There's a handout there called Excluded Foods. Get off those foods for like a month and just be prepared to be really happy that this little thing has disappeared that you weren't even aware of, and that little thing that somebody told you would never go away, and that thing that you just thought was genetic, and then they just lift.
Yeah.
So it's really, and I think that we're in the pandemic, it's a great time to try it out because you have total control over your food and you're not being tempted. And what else do you have to do anyway?
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I say when somebody says, "Oh, I can tolerate that." Like, no, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good, yeah. Everybody should grab that resource just to something to get
Thank
started
you.
with. But someone that's wanting to work on this, you mentioned there's the mental and the emotional components. Where do they start? With the food or with working on the mental emotional part?
No, this is a really good question. Because this is a cued disease, it's a stimulated. It's a reaction of these addicted neurons, neurons that were addicted by the food addiction scientists at the processed food industries. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It releases a flood of craving neurochemicals that is big enough to get control of behavior. It's an automatic. It's kind of like the perversion of a survival mechanism. So I say to people, start with the cueing. Maybe you can start with the food, but if you try to start with the food, you get success with the food and then you quit building your program, the cueing will just come back eventually and you'll fall off. And then it's worse than if you had never started because you get the self-blame, the reinforcement of the addiction, the helplessness, the hopelessness. It's worse than if you had never tried. So cueing comes in 6 categories. It does come from the food. These are addictive substances. The brain doesn't react to them like food. Food reactions happen in a different part of the brain. The part of the brain that reacts to processed foods is the addicted reward neurons. So the food itself is a source of cueing. The body itself can be a source of cueing. If you have pain or if you don't like your body, that's quite painful. Pain is a cue, it's a trigger, it stimulates the addiction. Then you have relationships are a big relapse trigger. Advertising cues in the environment. Loneliness is a huge trigger because it's stressful. Because for the 7 million years that the human brain has been developing, if you were in a tribe, you would live. Someone would fight off the predators, deliver your babies, find shelter, find food. You would live if you were in a tribe. If you're outside of a tribe, it's just a matter of hours, perhaps. Maybe you could survive a whole day, but a predator will get you. You're defenseless. So loneliness is incredibly stressful for people. And then emotions. Emotions are triggers. Happiness, mad, sad, afraid, ashamed, guilty, lonely. It activates a stress pathway, which is closely intertwined with the addicted neurons. It's a mechanical thing. You get the stress pathway going and it reaches over and it starts jiggling the addicted pathway. So people think they're stress eating. They're not stress eating. They're addicted eating. And it started with a stress pathway. So it may be that some people like, I'll get a new member. We have this online service, the Addiction Reset Community at foodaddictionreset.com. I'll get a new member and I'll just start listening really closely. They may not be able to start with their food. They may need to sit down with somebody in their household and get the triggering squared away. like just like you got to keep that stuff locked in the trunk of your car. You can't leave it out. It's a very, very powerful cue, availability. So they have to figure out where they're going to start. We are there supporting them. We have ideas, but we are building self-respect. We are building their capabilities to evaluate, judge, make really good decisions for themselves. It's a lot of fun to get people into a really safe environment.
Yeah, good. Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So in the food part, if somebody wants to kind of jump in, I know it's not a good thing to just jump into something, but some people do sugar detoxes or cleanses. Is that safe for people? Is it kind of like an oil change where you need to once in a while do that? Or is it causing mental problems that people think they're on this diet cycle?
Yeah, so you're raising a really good question, which is, what is the person's history with eliminating foods? Because part of the trauma that food addicted people have endured is dieting. Reduced calorie dieting is very traumatic because it wakes up fear of famine. There is another part of the brain, the most primitive part of the brain, the food seeking part of the brain, the original part of the brain, that just monitors, is there enough food? If there's not enough food for long enough and that part of the brain wakes up and starts to take control of behavior, it manifests as binging. Because that part of the brain says, if you find food, my goodness, eat it as fast as you can. Eat all of it. Eat it until you can't eat anymore, and then run away and hide so that a predator doesn't get you, and then come back and finish eating it.
Yeah.
Well, we call that pathological, but that's a survival behavior. And it's in our culture where there's all this toxic food-like substance about, it's deadly, because this brain has been woken up and it's looking for these toxic substances. It's a combination of a hyperactive food searching brain and these addicted neurons and these stressed out pathways. It's a lot of the brain is compromised by processed food addiction. So there's some people you cannot say, give up these foods. You cannot say that to them because it's associated with dieting and it wakes up that food seeking brain, the binge brain. So what I say to those people is, don't give anything up. Oh no, don't give anything up. But when you're ready, after you've been in the community for a while and you're really feeling strong, start making some clean meals. Don't take anything out, but just start some regular, fill up your crock pot, practice filling up your crock pot for a couple of weeks. Take everything really, really slow because going too fast is stressful. Like maybe they can say, yeah, I can fill up my crock pot. Okay, fill up your crock pot. And then we have on that website some breakfast recipes. Crock pot is going to feed you for lunch and dinner and a snack. And then here are your breakfast recipes. And they can get going from that side. That will stabilize. That will fill them up. That will make them feel nourished. That will make them feel satisfied. It'll make them feel secure. And then gradually they might just kind of just gently, naturally lose interest in the addictive substances. So you're not putting them through the trauma of giving something up, but they just kind of drift away. It's a very compassionate approach. I think it recognizes the trauma that people have been through around the processed food industry itself and being addicted without your knowledge and against your will. And then the lack of recognition by the health community. Like you go to your health professionals and they give you a low calorie diet, which makes the whole thing worse.
Yeah.
And then when you can't follow it because finally the binge brain has been woken up, then they blame you. And then they start making up things about it. Oh, must be childhood issues. No, it's just, it's a mechanical issue in neurons that you have not diagnosed. So we do, on our website, Food Addiction Reset, we do have a brief self-quiz. It's not a diagnosis, but it's the 11 criteria that a drug counselor would use to see whether you have an active addiction. And that's on our website, Food Addiction Reset, and people can self-test to see if these symptoms of addiction are active in their lives.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I like how you said kind of more looking at the positive versus get rid of this stuff, but add in good stuff and it'll kind of naturally push out the bad. Yeah, I like that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so what about the people that aren't maybe in your program? They want to try it on their own, but then they can get maybe a couple weeks or a month, and then some event happens or summer or holidays.
Mm-hmm.
How is there something that they can use on their own to help them get through those?
Yeah, I'm just so glad you're bringing this up. This is a common syndrome and it devastates people. I was doing so well for 2 weeks. I did great for 3 years. I fell off and now I can't get back. So the most powerful part of the brain is a system. It's all over the brain of neurons. They appear in the frontal lobe. They appear everywhere. They're called mirror neurons. I like to call them copy neurons. And they have kept us alive for all 7 million years of our evolution. And now the food industry has turned them against us. How do they work? Because this is the single most important thing your viewers can learn from this interview. Mirror neurons helplessly, automatically, and powerfully copy the people that you see, the people you hear, the people you smell, the people around you. And mirror neurons do not know that the people on TV are not around you. Okay, mirror neurons see people on TV and they just copy them. It's automatic. So why are they so powerful? Why do I say they're the most powerful part of the brain? It's because if you were in a tribe for those 7 million years, you would live. How did you get accepted into a tribe and avoid getting kicked out of the tribe? It was by conforming. If the tribe was going to look for food and you said, oh, I don't feel like looking for food right now, you wouldn't be in that tribe for very long and you would die. But if you said, oh, everybody's looking for food, I'm looking for food too. Everybody's running into this cave. I'm running into that cave. Everybody's getting out their spears. I'm getting out my spears too. We're being attacked. Everybody's walking 2 weeks to migrate to the next food place. Well, I'm walking 2 weeks too. That is how you lived. Yeah. So the food industry has kidnapped, a lot of people use this term, kidnapped our mirror neurons by images on television. So you will see images of people sitting on sofas in the glow of a TV eating these horrible toxic substances. And your brain says, oh, look, everybody's sitting on a sofa in the glow of a TV eating toxic substances. Well, we better do that too. Or you drive down the road and you see 20 people lined up at fast food. People, it's like the car drives itself in. The mirror neurons are taking control of your brain. Oh, everybody's lined up for food. Well, we should be lined up for food too.
Yeah, I don't want to miss out.
And it doesn't, the thing that's very hard for people to get is these mechanisms are happening in the primitive brain. Even the midbrain is 3 million years old. Everybody thinks that the frontal lobe has control. The frontal lobe has very, very little control. It's, first of all, it's only about the size of 2% of the brain. And it's the newest brain. It's the neocortex. It's only 140,000 years old. That's like the blink of an eye in terms of the 7 million years that the most primitive part of the brain has been developing. So when it comes to allocating blood flow, the frontal lobe gets cut off all the time. So if you have a stressful event, then the blood flow is going to go to the stress pathway. And because it's over here jiggling the addiction pathway, the blood flow is going to go over there. And the frontal lobe will be cut off. It stops firing. And people say all the time, I know better. Why do I keep doing this? Well, because the I know better neuron storage is not getting any blood supply. It's not firing. It has absolutely no control over behavior. The frontal lobe is great for figuring out how to get rid of the food addiction scientist signaling. They use a vicious system called surround marketing. First, they addict to the neurons, and then they just provoke them all the time. Everywhere you go, you have availability. It's cheap. You can get it quickly. You can get it easily. You can hide in your car. And it's a technique called surround marketing. And that's what we do in our recovery systems is we have emails and Facebook, and we have 4 live events spaced out through the day. We have a website full of resources. So we are surrounding people with recovery, safety messaging. It's not safe to eat that. And so people can get this on their phone, for example, and eventually they look at emails, they join Zoom chats, they listen to podcasts. Eventually this will become a recovery cue. It will become a control cue. And this will be able to cue the brain into, no, I don't need that. No, that makes me sick. Yeah. So it's a mechanical process. It's like learning a language. You just have to spend enough hours to program enough control neurons that you get more control neurons than you have neurons that you didn't know were being addicted. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So just thinking, we have a lot of work we could do in the world, just people that want to help with this. Is there anything that you suggest people might do? I know lead by example kind of thing would be one thing, but kind of help get this word out.
For a lot of years, I didn't quite know why I had that Stanford MBA, but now I do. We have built a business model so that people can have jobs running these online communities. So our online community where people get this surround marketing, they get a lot of understanding. They finally found out what really happened to them. They get a lot of relief. They get a lot of information about how to go slowly. And when you can go slowly and somebody's there pointing out your progress, you will stick with it long enough to reprogram enough neurons to get control. So we do that in a community of 125 people. It's called an addiction reset community, ARC. We call them ARCs. And just a couple of days ago, we've been running a beta, a test class to see if we can train people to run these ARCs. And it's been enormously successful. I am really good at enrolling people in these ARCs, showing them what they would get out of an ARC. It's very reasonable. The ARCs are very reasonably priced. And so we're offering this training. You can be an ARC manager. And we are, because I don't know, people tell me I'm the world's leading expert in the field because I read the textbook. Yeah. You can say that if you write the textbook, you can say that. Okay. That we now have really, 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 really expert training, and we will offer a certification along with it. You can either go in the direction of becoming an ARC manager, or even if you're a professional and you're just like, I want to know how to do this, you can get what we're calling the FARA certification, which is Food Addiction Recovery Advocate, FARA. And somebody who wants to get that certification, the only qualification we are asking for is that they have had a personal struggle with food. Right now, they also need to be able to speak, read, and write English because speak any other language well enough. And so I'm really hoping that people from other industries will be interested in this FARA certification, and then the job of being an ARC manager, which you do from home, takes about 4 hours a day. When your ARC is filled up, you could be making $40,000 to $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
We provide the ARC Central. We'll still provide a lot of programming, so that the ARC managers are really just involved in checking on their
Mm.
members. So this is a really, really exciting development, because we just don't, we have a terrible disease, unrecognized. Nobody knows how to treat it. The treatment that is being used makes it worse. And nobody is protecting themselves against these predatory industries. Diet, glamour, health, government, media is complicit in this. And then, of course, the tobacco / food industry. It's quite a dire situation. So the idea that you could actually make a living, a
Yeah.
part-time job in
Yeah.
the field is really exciting. Really
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. That's great. You can make a
Yeah.
living and make a difference in the world.
Oh gosh, it's the coolest thing. People just like, we have our first arc is almost full. So this is why we're gearing up to spin off
Yeah.
the second one. But just to be around people who were dying, and they knew they were dying, and they
Cool.
were just actively engaged in trying to not die, and getting worse and getting worse, to finally just lift them into the lifeboat,
Yeah.
and then they know they're okay. It's amazing. I get
Yeah.
to do that every day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Wonderful to be involved in someone's recovery and watch them go from one. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, even in people who don't need a job, or don't want a job, or
Mm.
don't want to be a health professional, I would recommend this training. It's not expensive.
Huh.
If
Yeah.
you have people in your life
Mm.
whom you're just watching them die,
Right.
and they're going to the doctor, and they're just getting more and more medication, and the doctor is frustrated, and the doctor's saying, harmful things like, you're not trying hard enough, I told you what to do, just
Yeah.
completely missing this massive field of addicted neurons that are driving the person's behavior. Just even if somebody wanted to just help another person,
Yeah.
or was curious. Yeah, so that's a different website. The training website is Food Addiction Recovery Advocate.com. And it's a brand new website, so you have to put in the www.foodaddictionrecoveryadvocate.com.
Okay. We'll write that down.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great
Thank you.
stuff. So much wonderful information. We're
Thank
coming
you.
close to
Thank
the
you.
end, but I wanted to mention you had a free gift for people
Yeah.
to kind of take away, and besides the other things we mentioned to start on today, but you were offering your breakthrough food addiction, the first 4 steps.
Yes. So this is based on something called motivational interviewing, where the person is being given information, personalized information, that they can use to make their own decision.
Mm.
So the first question that's answered is, what is the problem really?
Mm.
So the problem really is that you've got these programmed neurons in your brain. You didn't ask for them. Nobody ever called you up and said, you mind if we program your neurons so that we're blasting advertisements for our processed foods inside your head all the time? Nobody did that. So that's step one. You get a self-questionnaire and a video, like, what is the real problem? So that's step one, is to find out the real problem. Step two is to find out what you personally would get out of recovery.
Mm.
It's just does take a lot of time to reprogram neurons, like about the same amount of time it would take to learn a language, almost. So you get a questionnaire where you can pick out what you would get out of it, and then a video. And then the third set is why nothing else has worked.
Mm.
Because why should I try again? I've tried hundreds. I bought every diet book. I've tried every diet. I've gotten the surgery. I've taken the pills. I've gone to this, and nothing has worked. Why should I try again?
Yeah.
So that's question number 3. Step 3
Mhm.
is this is why none of those things worked.
Yeah.
And this is why recovery from food addiction is a very, very new approach. The textbook has only been out since January of 2018.
Yeah.
We've had this beta food addiction recovery group for 2.5 years, but oh my gosh, we've just improved. Now it works really well. And then the 4th step is kind of about, it's a queuing inventory, but I'm not going to fool you. I mean, this is a disease that's run by queuing and mirror neurons. So if you can get into the addiction reset community at foodaddictionreset.com, and you can get your mirror neurons engaged with healthy people, you will be shocked at how much easier it is. You just find yourself doing things. You're like, why am I doing this? I've been wanting to do this for years. I've been wanting to get out my crock pot for years. Why am I doing it now? It's
Yeah.
because you have mirror neurons directing
Yeah.
your brain to do it. It's so cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. Sounds really, yeah.
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 So you'll be offering that to your viewers as a free gift, the 4 steps to break through food addiction.
Yeah. So they can just click on the link below this video and just add in your name and email and grab your copy of that. It'll be sent to you.
Super.
Yeah. Just thank
Super.
you again for wonderful
Yay.
information and this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was
Thanks
nice.
for having me. I appreciate this. I appreciate what you're doing, Michelle.
Yeah.
So much. People do get a lot out of these summits. It raises awareness, and it does just show people a door out of a really, really traumatic situation.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thanks again.
Thank
See
you.
everybody on the next video. Bye.
Bye-bye.